Thanks so much for being here. We're excited to have everyone here for our third alumni panel presentation. A big thank you to the department leadership, to the department staff and admin for all their support in putting this together, Humanities Communications for their help, and especially to our presenters for being here and being willing to share their experiences with us today. How many of you have been, this is our third panel, like I said, has anyone here been able to attend either of the other two that we held last year? Oh good, several of you are back, that's wonderful. That hopefully means that you found it helpful. And the plan is to keep presenting these each semester to help students as they're considering what their next steps might be. These panels came out of some research that we conducted in 2020 with graduates from the BYU English department, looking at their outcomes moving on into work after graduation. And overall, good news is the outcomes are very good. One of the things that came out though is that students really wished that they could see examples of what people were doing and how they were using their English degree in a professional capacity. So we have made some efforts to bring that to you through this panel. In addition to our alumni panel, we've got a couple of other resources that I want to introduce you to that we've created that have just been introduced this fall for students. So we have, if you'll notice on the far right, this is the English department homepage. On the far right is a tab called English at Work. And at that tab, you'll be able to find a recording of this event in a little bit, as well as a recording from one of them last year. And we'll continue to collect those there that you can go back and review at your leisure. But also we have this English Alumni Stories database, where you can go and read brief snippets, brief versions of graduates from our program, their stories and what they're doing with their degrees. So we encourage you to take advantage of these resources. They're there just right on the homepage for you. All right, we are going to go in order. It's just a random order, but we're going to have the presenters share their stories in this order, and then following which Dr. Christensen will lead a Q&A session. So as you're listening to these presentations, be thinking about what questions you might have, things that you want more information about, or things that maybe they didn't address in their presentations, and you'll have a chance to ask some of those questions towards the end. So we're going to go ahead and start with Jennifer.
So my name is Jennifer Egan. I am a level designer. I am a narrative designer. I work for WB Games, so Warner Brothers. They make a lot of different Warner Brothers titles, like if you play the Arkham games, so those Batman games. They've made some Lego games. I'm pretty sure they made the like Shadow of Mordor titles. And currently, I'm working on Hogwarts Legacy at Avalanche, which is a studio in Salt Lake City, actually. Avalanche used to be owned by Disney, but before that, they made lots of games that you might know, like Tag and the Power of Juju. They made a lot of different titles for IPs, like some Hannah Montana games. They made like Rugrats games. They made a Prince of Persia game. But then when they were acquired by Disney, they made Disney Infinity Games. And now that they've been acquired by Warner Brothers, we're making Hogwarts Legacy. It's awesome. It's been a really great experience. So I graduated from BYU in 2016. I put winter, but I meant fall. I forgot that that's how we talk about it here. But yeah, I graduated December of 2016, and I walked in April of 2017. I was an English major the entire time I was here. It was the major I declared coming in. I thought I would change it, and I didn't. It felt right, even though I was hesitant, because I was like, well, I'm really, really smart. I don't know if I should be an English major. Every time it doesn't. That's how I felt, until I got into the coursework and realized that's not what it is at all. Fantastic launching point for my career. I got a double minor in digital humanities and editing. If you guys are not familiar with the digital humanities minor, it is incredible. I assume it's still here. That's good. Okay. There's several tracks you can do in that minor. I did the graphic design track and the web development track, which is how I kind of got started on this tech path. But the editing minor, just loved words so much. I thought maybe I could be a writer, editor. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I left BYU, which is why I studied so widely. Some of my favorite courses in the English major were postmodern lit, because in that class, I don't remember who taught it, but we studied very broadly. We studied comics, which was super cool because that is definitely literature. And I chose to write like my final essay in that class on Bioshock Infinite, which is a game. And I consider video games postmodern literature. And from there, I worked for a few years, and then I got my master's in entertainment arts and engineering, which is nobody else has that master's, it's only at the U, but it's basically a master's of video game development. Oh, and these are pictures of me at BYU. You probably recognize JFSB, and then this one was also in front of the JFSB, so I was glad that I found those. So what do I do as a game developer? So I say I'm a level designer, but I'm also a narrative designer. It's depending on where you go, they will define that differently. But I am in the level design department working on missions. So this character up here in the top left, if you've been following Hogwarts Legacy at all, that's Sebastian Sallow. He's the Slytherin friend character you can make in that game. And I work on all of his content. As a mission implementer, which is what we call him at Avalanche, I make sure that all of the missions that you play with him work, they're fun, all of the writing is being called correctly, the dialogue is being called at the right times, you get the right items, if you save and quit, things reset correctly. So I do a lot of technical stuff and a lot of creative stuff, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So to the right of Sebastian, you can see that's what's called a blockout. It's a level blockout when level designers are getting ready to, basically before, like long before the game is done, you make these things called blockouts where you're testing out different levels before all the art assets are ready, before all the writing is ready. But you can test out the gameplay and make sure that the space that you've made is fun. I don't really do very much layout work at my job. I do a lot of this scripting stuff, which you can see, it's very messy. It's a visual scripting language in Unreal Engine called Blueprints. It's basically, it's kind of like coding, but you're connecting different nodes together. I might say, take this item that's in the world and make it jump and rotate like 50 degrees when you hit it or something. I also do a lot of that to create moments in the game, which is part of the narrative design. I might have, after you finish having this conversation with this character, then freeze the player movement. Don't let them move, because if they can turn around and they can run away and break stuff. So we're just gonna freeze them here for just a second, and then we'll cue a mini game. Stuff like that is a lot of what I do. And this picture in the bottom right is pretty much exactly what I look like at work. In short, I solve problems in creative ways. I run into problems every day, not just solving bugs, although that's a lot of what I do right now. It's also problems like, this is the story that we have. These are the constraints that we're under because we are working in a very well-known IP, like Harry Potter. How can we create something new that also feels nostalgic? How can we change this thing because we were told that we can no longer kill off this character, but we've already gone like really far in the design and we don't have time to pivot very much? How can we fix this narratively and with gameplay? My timeline looks a little bit like this, and it might be a little bit different than what you might expect or what you might want to hear. I will try to be fair here, but when I graduated, like I said, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I studied very broadly. I got my double minor. I did clubs. I was actually part of the College of Humanities Communications Department, which does the posters that you'll see in the stairwell, or I did graphic design and stuff for them. I did web development. My internships, I did a technical writing internship, which, if you're not aware what technical writing is, basically just making sure that the language of something is incredibly concrete. It can't be misunderstood. So I did that for IM Flash, making sure that these processes were documented correctly so that people could be safe, so that they would do them right the first time, reading instructions, and you do what it says. And that was also very helpful, but I had no idea that was going to lead me to where I was. What I realized was I had a ton of skills in a ton of different fields, but they weren't finally honed enough for me to get the jobs that I wanted. And that's when I realized I needed to go to grad school. And I thought a lot about different options. I researched like crazy. And I thought maybe I could do a web development boot camp because I've done web dev before. Maybe I go into animation, like maybe I go work for Pixar. That would be really cool because I've always loved art. I wasn't like the best artist, but I could do some art. I was decent. Obviously writing. So I wasn't sure, but then I realized that somebody has to make video games. And I play video games, and I love them. And somebody's got to make them. So it might as well be me. So that's when I started looking into game development specific programs. And I applied very widely. I would recommend that you too apply very widely if you're thinking of doing that. Don't stay close to home if you're scared. Don't be scared. I eventually found University of Utah. I had no idea they had such a good program when I applied. But when I got my acceptance and I researched them more and I went to one of their end of year presentations of all their work that the students had done, I realized that it was a very globally competitive program. I got a scholarship as an English major. And when I was there, I felt so intimidated by all of the other people around me who had studied computer science, who had studied art, who had studied things that felt way more applicable, like electrical engineering. And I was coming as a literature person. I had so much catching up to do. But then I did catch up, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was way more prepared to go into games than almost all of the rest of them. Because when I got there, I was serious. I was very intentional about learning all the stuff when I got there. And I had the soft skills that they did not have and that are hard to learn. And then I got my internship actually at WB Games while I was in the master's program. So I had a year and a half of experience under my belt after my 2-year master's program was done. I got hired there and the rest is history. So how does English Lit make me a better game designer? There's probably some obvious ones, but critical thinking is huge. They talk about that a lot, and it seems like you've probably heard that a lot and you're tired of hearing it. But like I said, I have to solve problems creatively, all day, every day. Not just with the design of the game or the design of the story, but with working with the systems that we have. There's not enough time to change how this works, so how can we make this game fun using the tech that we currently have? Organizing and presenting info. A video game is like a huge visual essay, almost. It's entertaining. You have to create an argument. You have to create something that you're trying to tell. You have to make sure it's organized, it's cohesive, all the different game design elements work together rather than against each other. And you have to think about your audience. I have to think about the player constantly. What do they expect out of this game? The game, something that you might expect out of Hogwarts Legacy is very different than what you'd expect out of Pokemon. How do they want to play? What do they want to play? Why are they here? How can I keep them here? How can I keep them reading? And like I said before, I have to communicate across disciplines constantly. So I'm working with programmers, I'm working with artists, I'm working with producers, I'm working with audio people, and part of that is inherent with knowing how to communicate in writing or by reading. And the other part of it I would attribute to how I studied broadly when I was here at BYU. I was in the BYU Singers, I was in the video game club, I took a programming class, I did web development, graphic design. So all of that came together to form a very good interdisciplinary skill set. And obviously storytelling, creative writing. That's very, very important in games. So my advice to all of you would be, like I said, to be intentional about your education. I didn't feel like I was very intentional about my education until I was done with BYU. I just had fun here. I love to study, and I tried to know very broad things, but I didn't really have a very good goal in mind. But at the same time, it all worked out because when I went to grad school, I realized, okay, I've got all the tools, now I just need to sharpen them and put them together. Definitely talk to your professors as much as you can, as many professors as you can, build relationships with them. They do want to help you. They're nicer than maybe they look because they're talking to you all day and they're teaching you, but if you don't talk to them after class or whatever, you have no idea what they're like as a person, and you should. They're very knowledgeable. They have a lot of things they can teach you that is outside of the scope of just that one class that you're in. Having relationships with my professors helped me to figure out the path I wanted to take after I was done with BYU, because I was able to go back to the professors. I've made relationships while I was here, and they gave me great advice. And they were it was more of a peer-to-peer situation because I was no longer their student, but still kind of. Study broadly, like I said. If you want to go into something like this, you definitely need to have a broad skill set. Be involved in different things, learn new things. Part of being a good game designer is being just a good person who experiences life and experiences, life imitates art, right? Art imitates life. If you're not experiencing life, you can't make good art. Don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. I definitely got out of my comfort zone, and I'm so glad I did. But most importantly, build on what you know. I am not necessarily in a field that you would think, oh, English major, that's like a direct tunnel into that. But I took what I already knew, and I made it so that I was like the best darn thing, so that people would want me, because I had skills that other people didn't have, as well as the necessary things to get into that career. So you don't have to start over. You don't have to say, well, none of this worked out, I'm going to study something completely different. Save yourself time by building on what you know. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be with you all. My name is Michael Walton, and I do not make Harry Potter games, so I'll just sit down. That really is the best stuff. I am senior manager of a copy and brand team at a tech company called Pluralsight, based here in Utah. It's on the northern end of Silicon Slopes area. Pluralsight is a tech workforce development company, which I know sounds so sexy, but what it means is that we provide a technology skill learning platform as well as a software development analytics platform, and we also have a nonprofit arm that partners with nonprofits and in order to bring technology skills to underserved communities so that we can help those communities and help diversify the tech workforce. So a little bit more about me. I graduated from my undergrad in 2018 with an English major and an editing minor. And then I also stuck around here at BYU for a master's in English with an emphasis in rhetoric and composition. And then I graduated in 2020, which was the best time to enter the workforce. And I have about 7 years in professional writing. A lot of that I gained here at BYU by doing freelance writing while I was attending school. I also do some freelance novel editing, and I'm a creative writer, which is important context for this because I've always loved writing stories. I've loved writing novels. I hand wrote a novel in my 7th grade, and it was terrible, but I've always loved writing, and so I knew coming into college that I wanted to find a way that I could do what I love professionally, right? I wanted to write I wanted to edit, and I feel like I found that. So a little bit about what I do, and then I'll show you some examples. The best way I can explain copywriting or content writing is that anytime you see almost anything from a business, from a company, whether that's an email, it's the blog post that comes up on your Google search, it's the ad that you can't skip on YouTube anymore, it's social media ads, right? All of that stuff is either written by or vetted and edited and reviewed by a copywriting or content team. And I'm not going to read all this. This is a list of some of the things that we work on. And really we're supporting initiatives across the business, mostly in marketing, but all across our business. And we also are really the advocates for the brand voice, right, which is a really important part of any brand's identity, right? It's what makes progressive commercials so funny, right? It's what makes Old Spice, right? It's the brand voice. It's how it sounds, it's how the brand comes across. And so really a copy and content writer, you're the one who reinforces that brand voice. And in our case, we recently had a brand refresh and we physically built a new brand voice and a new brand style guide, thought about, made all those important decisions about how we want our brand to interact with our audience. So as a senior manager, I lead a team of junior copywriters and a lead copywriter who she also does editing in addition to writing. Our junior copywriters just write. And in addition to writing and editing, I also collaborate with others across the business to build messaging, right? They see us not just as the writing and editing experts, but as communication experts. So they come to us to collaborate on how we build messaging, right? How we make sure that we're communicating our value to customers in the best way possible, as well as storytelling, identity strategies, all that good stuff. So I want to show some examples of things we've worked on recently. This is a fun infographic. Our graphic design team is amazing, and we collaborate with them a lot. Helpful context, our copy team, it's a big company, so our copy team sits on a creative team, which sits on a brand team, and that's part of the greater marketing organization. So we work really closely with designers, with video producers. So this is an infographic. These two, I believe, were advertisements for some campaigns, both related to cloud. Cloud's a big thing in tech right now, obviously. Up on the top left here, we've been doing kind of mockumentary style videos that have been so fun to work on. This is the Cloud Ship Enterprise. It's a leader who's taking the charge to take the journey to the cloud too far and being weirdo about it. And so we wrote the script for that, worked with an agency to produce it, and that's been really fun. Over on the right here, this is a shirt, well, a design for part of a shirt we made for an event. And our audiences are nerds. And so we get to channel our nerdy side and made a D&D character sheet for a developer. And that was really fun. So we worked with some developers across the business to make sure we were producing something that would be relatable and fun. And then this is a web page. We also I didn't mention that before, we do lots of web pages. We had a big acquisition last year that was combining two big brands. And so we've kind of rebuilt our whole website, and that's involved writing a lot of web pages. So I won't go into all this, but this is a little bit of my timeline. I started college, I did a year of college before my mission, and then when I came back after my mission, I started freelance writing for a marketing agency called CopyPress. And so I started that as soon as I was back from my mission, and I did that all the way through my time here at BYU. But I also tried to take as many of the opportunities offered here at BYU as possible. I edited for Professor Brandy Siegfried. I edited some books that she was working on. Through the internship program, I was connected with EKR, which is a marketing agency here in Provo, and I worked with them. I also worked as a writing fellow. So all of that, I totally agree with Jennifer, right? It was broad, still focused in writing and editing, but a broad stroke of experiences that really helped me. And the whole time while I was in college, I was trying to build a portfolio for working later. While I was in grad school, I taught Writing 150 in English 312 here, and I worked as an associate coordinator of the Writing Fellows. And then when I graduated again, the worst time ever in 2020, it took a while because it was right when companies weren't hiring anymore. But after a few months, I got hired at a fintech, financial tech company called Finicity here in Utah as a content writer. And then about a year later, I went over to Pluralsight as a senior copywriter and a senior, and then I was later promoted to senior manager. So how the English major helped me, I'm not going to go into all these because a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. I'm also going to say the editing minor, because editing minor gave me a lot of really helpful technical training. That's one thing I wanted to touch on is, a lot of people have a pretty good gut feel for good writing, even if they can't execute it, right? If they can read it, they have a feel for what's working or not, but a lot of times they can't communicate it. And having the strengths that we learn here in the English major and in the editing minor gives you a vocabulary. You have a better understanding of training, best practices, and skills that allow you to articulate what's working or what's not. And it also allows you to justify decisions. You'd be surprised by how often, like our CMO, our Chief Marketing Officer, comes to us in about one word, right? Because it's important. One word matters when you're trying to deliver a message as well as possible. And so being able to talk about writing and justify decisions is really helpful. I have on here feedback loops and writing growth. I know sometimes we're very vulnerable about our writing. It's very scary to share it. But if you want to work in writing, that's all you're doing, right? Everyone's going to see it. Some people are nice about it. Some people are very mean. So, right, like everyone has an opinion. And a lot of people think they know more about writing than we do. I'll tell you that. And so getting used to taking feedback and giving feedback is really helpful. And just writing growth, continuing to write, getting pushback. I think especially in grad school, which I know from some professors that are here, really helped push my writing to another level, right? I thought that my English major did that sufficiently, but grad school pushed it even further, especially in terms of concision and communicating ideas very clearly and quickly, right? Cutting out that fluff. And then one other thing I want to touch on is collaboration. I know that 80% of us moan and groan when we're asked to partner up again and talk about ideas in a class, but that's all we do, right? So getting that practice in articulating ideas is so helpful, because again, doing that every single day at work. And then just good research practices, right? Copying, content writing. Sometimes you're given research, sometimes you're asked to provide that on your own. And the same research practices and skills we learn as English and editing professionals is really helpful in the workplace, because your credibility is really important as a company, and you gotta make sure you have facts and data to back these up. Just to close, a couple, I know we're gonna have a Q&A, but I just wanted to get contact information. Just in case, I'm happy to talk on email or LinkedIn. I also wanted to give you all some sites. If you are interested in freelance writing, these are places where you can go for work like that. Some, again, that's a whole other thing. Some offer different rates. Do research to see what you're most comfortable with. But that's a good way to build a portfolio. The biggest thing I look for when hiring writers is their portfolio, right? In addition, obviously, to education and experience, I want to see their own voice. I want to see how they deploy their skills. And so portfolio is the first thing you look for, and it's usually the first thing that gets candidates away, other than obviously like I haven't had any experience. And then I put HubSpot up here. It's a website that, if you are interested in copy and content writing, that can give you for free a lot of marketing knowledge. Because again, as English majors, we don't maybe have a lot of that expertise, but HubSpot can give it to you for free, and it's really helpful to have that baseline understanding. You get cool certifications you can put on LinkedIn, and it's really helpful to prepare you to work in a marketing space. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Hi, I think Jennifer and I caught the same cold, because I also had a cold 2 weeks ago. And I know I'm contagious, but my voice is also recovering a little bit. So I I put writer, which I feel like was such a simple subtitle compared to these like fancy subtitles that I went, but it's a really wide umbrella for me. So my debut novel was Speak Easy, Speak Love. It came out from HarperCollins. My debut graphic novel was The Heart Hunter. I also write under Mickey George. And then last week, this Enola Holmes comic came out, also from Legendary, and I have another adult novel under contract with Penguin Random House and another IP comic for the Monsterverse, which is like King Kong and Godzilla, which I signed an NDA, so don't tell anyone I told you that. I just realized. So no, I'm not writing a King Kong comic, but I am. And then I also do a lot of books for visual novel apps like Chapters and Choices. So I write the scripts for narrative designers like Jennifer, and I write the dialogue in the narration boxes, and I will do like a kind of choose your own adventure book for these different apps. So those are kind of my two main sources of income, is advance from novels, royalties, comics paid by the page, and then contract work with these different visual novel companies. So I graduated in 2014, and I took a slightly different approach than the first two people, which, again, I don't think either is wrong, but when I started at BYU, I was like, I'm going to tell stories for a living, and that's it, nothing else. And I did not do a lot of stuff broadly. I was very like, this is what I'm going to do, and I was just super focused on it. And I actually finished the novel that became Speak Easy, Speak Love while I was at BYU, and got a literary agent my last semester for it. And I took every single fiction class that the English department had to offer. And I was just constantly writing. Brandon Sanderson's fiction class, I think now you have to like kind of apply and do like a portfolio. But back in my time, that class was like, got totally booked up by grad students every year because they could sign up for classes first. And if you wanted to take it as an undergrad, you showed up on the first day of class and you just like hoped you got lucky because he would offer maybe like 3 or 4 extra spots to undergrad students. And then all the other spots were taken up by grad students. And when I went to that one of the first questions Brandon Sanderson asked is, has anyone finished a novel, like from beginning to end? And I was like, I've written 2. And he gave me the first spot because I'd already written 2 novels. So that's how I squeaked in as like an undergrad. And every semester I would look up which professors were teaching the fiction classes, both for, there's like a whole variety. There's poetry and normal fiction, and there's like the children's books one, and there's publishing ones. And I tried to take classes from different professors, and I took the beginning creative writing class like 3 times, but from different people, so that I could get that sort of range of experience. And so I took Brandon Sanderson's fiction class, but then I took that class again from Lance Larson, because I was like, that'll be different, because like a poet and an epic fantasy writer. And then when I was in Lance Larson's class, a lot of his assignments were focused on like flash fiction and like sort of short experimental fiction, and every assignment I put in, he was like, this is not bad, but it just reads like the beginning of a novel instead of like short fiction. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's what I'm good at. And he ended up allowing me to kind of turn in chapters of that novel instead of the other assignments. And I was always given this sort of like flexibility and encouragement and advice. I really became a writer at BYU. So after graduating and while I was working here, I paid my way through college by being a ghostwriter and editor and a work-for-hire writer. Work-for-hire is a lot of publishing and production companies. They will create the outline and the premise of a book for you. I don't know if you guys know, for example, like the Warrior Cat books by Aaron Hunter. The first 10 were actually written by Aaron Hunter. The rest are like written by a whole multitude of authors who all write under the umbrella Aaron Hunter. So a lot of like children's book especially that are like really long series, those are work for hire books where they give you the plot and then you write them for them, and then you just have to write under that like pseudonym umbrella name. So I did the work for hire and the ghostwriting while I was in class. I've worked at the Salt Lake City Public Library as a teen librarian. I've worked at the King's English Bookshop as a bookseller and still do part-time sometimes. I was an acquisitions editor at Flux Publishing, which is a indie YA publisher. I was also the personal assistant of Mark Pett, who is a picture book illustrator and writer who is here local in Utah, and so that's how I learned how like the picture book business worked, and like a whole bunch of other stuff in the middle. And the thing about if you want to write novels and write this kind of stuff, I will be perfectly honest, it's a bit of a grind, and that doesn't mean that it's not worth it if that's what you really love. I think there's a lot of other ways, as you can see on this panel, to kind of really utilize your storytelling skills and your critical thinking skills, and to use your degree. If you want to make a living off of your creative writing though, it's probably not going to happen right as you graduate. It takes time to both like publish stuff and get royalties, and so this is the stuff I was doing. So I don't do most of this now because I can make all my money from writing contracts, but you know, for the first like 6 years after graduating, it was like a hustle of small part-time jobs. And I considered getting an MLS to be a full-time librarian. I also considered an MFA to be able to teach creative writing and get my master's in creative writing. And I did a lot of research into both, but ultimately I wanted to be a novelist, and you don't need an MFA to be published. It can help, it can give you a lot of networking opportunities. It also allows you to teach if that's something that like really fulfills you or makes you happy. It doesn't make me that happy, so I decided not to. And it's you don't need it. So my strategy kind of going forward, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Neil Gaiman's commencement speech on art, but he talks about that telling stories for a living was a mountain for him in the distance. And every choice that he made moving forward was like, is this moving me closer to the mountain or is it moving farther away? And when I was an undergrad doing like work for hire and ghostwriting stuff, or working at a library or working at a bookstore, that was still being close to books, so it was closer to the mountain. But then I've been offered full-time salary jobs both at those game studios, at the library, at the bookstore, and the marketing department. And I said no, because for me, there's only a finite amount of energy and effort you have to give into stuff. And I said no because what I wanted was to make a living off of my creative writing. And the truth is that it took a lot longer to make a living off of it because I was making those decisions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing something that makes you feel just as fulfilled and just as creatively challenged and just as happy, that is not maybe exactly what it is. But for me, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was very like zeroed in on that, and I was focused on like a hawk. And so I turned down a little bit more secure options so that I had more time for my creative writing. And then I guess my last slide is, I don't personally believe that your career, the way that you make money, has to be your passion. I think that your family can be your passion. I think that the hobby can be your passion. I think some kind of like service can be your passion in life. It doesn't have to be the way that you make money.
However, if you're spending 40 to 60 hours of your life every year doing something, you should at least feel like it's utilizing your skill set, it is making you feel fulfilled and challenged, and that you are contributing to the world in a way that you feel is meaningful. I personally think that humanity is hugely dependent on stories. I also think that video games and all these kind of things also count as stories. It's not just like novels. There's like 100 different ways that we consume stories. And I was told, so they didn't have this when I was an undergrad, but they did have a lot of lectures that were basically like, don't worry, you won't be homeless, you can find a job as an English major, which I feel like I had friends in like the physics and stuff, and they were just like grilling them on like, you know, like internships, and I'm like, we just get a lot of pep talks in the English department of like, don't worry, you can use your degree. But I was told being an English major teaches you not what to think, but it teaches you how to think. And that in turn kind of gives you the skills to sort of explore stuff, and I really agree with that, and I feel like my major like helped me exponentially. And being a creative writer full time is kind of a like tough road, and there's a lot of hustle involved. But also I really love it, and I don't regret any of it.
So I am Kristen, and I am a product manager at Deseret Book, and McKelle and I think we're going to have a little bit of overlap because I'm also an agented writer, and I'm doing this a little bit differently than she does. So as product manager, I get to work with my books, with basically every book Deseret makes, and I help shepherd it from the very earliest concept to a final product. So I'm doing a lot of big picture, structural, organizational, and developmental edits on these books, which is really fun for me because I also did an editing minor, and I am not so excited about punctuation and grammar, and I'm really excited about stories. So these are just a sample of some of my favorite books that I've worked on. If I had them all up here, it would be an absurdly long list because I get to have my hands in kind of every part of the publishing process. So I am doing some proofreading, I'm doing cover, concept, I'm doing the blurbs on the back of the book. It's really exciting. If this is something that you're interested in, this is a good way to sort of understand what goes into creating a book. I worked a million jobs when I was a student, and part of it was because I was poor and needed money, and part of it was because I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to sort of give as many things a shot as I could, and so the ones with little asterisks next to them are the ones I want to talk about because they're opportunities I think you should know about. So in 2018, I did an internship at the Wordsworth Trust in Grasmere, England, and I got to work at Dove Cottage, which is the historical home of William and Dorothy Wordsworth. It was honestly my favorite thing I did my entire time at school. I got to give tours to people from all over the world. I got to spend a whole summer studying a particular type of literature in the spot where it was written, and I made some really lasting friends. So like this is a picture I took of Dove Cottage while I was there. And the thing I would say about this is that it is open to any English major, and I went there with a history major I think as well, and you don't have to want to pursue academia to do something like this. Like I went into this applying just because I wanted the experience and not necessarily because I knew how it would contribute to my career path. And that's okay because career paths are not usually straight lines. For me, it was a huge zigzag. And I got to do something that had always interested me, and that has really made me a better person and better at adjusting a message to a different audience, because I had to do that on tours all the time, because sometimes we'd have people from Israel who'd never heard of Wordsworth, or sometimes we'd have people who knew more about Wordsworth than I did. And so it was really just learning to speak to an audience, which is something that's useful for any job, I think. I did not start as an English major. I actually entered BYU as a mechanical engineering major, and then ended up switching and was technically a film major when I decided that I wanted to take Brandon Sanderson's creative writing class. So I did apply for that, and It's focused partly on workshopping, but it's also on exploring the overall publishing process. And it was through that class that I met a writing group I've been meeting with weekly for 6 years now. But it also helped me realize that there was money in publishing, not a lot, but some, and that it was something I could do, and I could spend my life on it, and I could not feel bad about making that decision. And so I switched my major, I took a bunch of writing and publishing classes, and I met Amy Jameson, who's a literary agent at A+B Works. She's the agent who initially discovered Shannon Hale, though she doesn't represent her anymore, and these are some of her other authors. And I met Amy through one of my classes, I think, and I found out that she had an open internship spot, and so I decided that even though I was working another job, I had a couple of hours a week that I could dedicate to reading manuscripts and query letters from authors, just to see if it was something that fit. And so I did that, and I learned a ton of skills that have benefited me as a writer, like knowing when a book is breaking, and when it's working really well, and being able to analyze and articulate that. But that's also really helped me, obviously, in my job as an editor. In Utah, we are super lucky because we live in a hub of really talented writing professionals and writers. And so these are just some opportunities I think you should know about. These conferences are helpful if you're interested as a writer or if you're interested as any part of the publishing process. And LDSPMA is happening here tomorrow and Saturday, actually. Teen Author Boot Camp you can't actually go to unless you're a teen, but you can volunteer there, and that's something I did, and helps me meet a lot of people, and it's really exciting to work with young teen authors and sort of feel their passion for writing. And then contests, I made a lot of money as a student by submitting to short story contests and getting small essays and stuff published. So Utah Original Writing Competition is a statewide amateur competition that anyone can enter. It's judged by people from out of state who are published writers, and you can make money doing that, which is great. And then Author Mentor Match and Pitch Wars are both international. Oh, it's not? Okay. That's good to know. Pitch Wars is not a thing. Author Mentor Match still is, and that's actually what got me my agent, is Author Mentor Match, where basically you can submit your published book to any published writer that is participating in this, and they'll help you shepherd it and edit it and sort of prepare it for querying, which was a really great experience for me for working on big picture edits on my own work, but also on meeting people who knew more about the industry than I did. And so overall, what I would just say about the English major is kind of the same thing everyone has already said. These skills are super translatable. You can apply them to pretty much any job you want. The thing that has been most useful for me in my current position is being comfortable with tension, especially because as an editor, you're tasked with helping fix someone else's writing, but fixing it while preserving their voice and not your own, which is really hard if you like writing and you like editing. And so it can be really difficult when your voice would say something very different or has a different opinion. And so this ability to sort of hold contradicting ideas together is something that you all have skills in that will be useful in pretty much anything that you apply yourself to. And this last point may get me not invited back, but I was so stressed as a student all the time about what's gonna make me money, am I gonna be homeless, am I gonna be happy, how much time can I dedicate to stuff, do I have time for my own fun? And the thing that I've really learned is that it just really is not that serious. You don't have to be so stressed about all of this stuff, because as long as you're moving in a direction and pursuing something, you're moving forward. Even if it doesn't look like it, if you are meeting people and getting experience and you can sort of vocalize what you're learning, you're going to be okay. And I think that's it for me, so thank you.
Okay, I have questions I could pose, but given the limited time, I don't want to preclude if somebody has a question ready to go ahead and give you a chance. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
McKelle, how did you get into writing for hire?
So I got into it kind of through my agent, and also because I knew an agent through being an editor when I was at Flux Press, and they kind of
they're the ones who know which of these companies are going. But also, if you look online, so Workman Publishing or like Dovetail Fiction or Workbooks, if you go to their submission pages, they usually have small pitches of the work for hire books that they're like seeking writers for, and you can usually submit through their contact form too.
Thank you.
Okay, any other ready questions? Yeah.
Michael, are you offering any internships right now?
Yeah, good question. So not right now, we do occasionally do summer internships. So you can keep an eye on there, and they're paid. They're really awesome, really fun. And a lot of times, I haven't yet, because we haven't needed an intern yet, I haven't yet had an intern. But they're offered all across the company if there's, like related roles you may be interested in. Yeah, so I'd look for those in, April, May, sometime around there.
Okay, any others? Yeah.
So I'm currently majoring in environmental science, but I'm planning on switching to English and creative writing track. And I was wondering if I should still minor in environmental science, because that's something I'm still interested in. Like, would I be able to find a career path that involves both writing and environmental science?
I mean,
I think so, yeah.
I mean, like, this is like maybe a more obvious answer, but there's a lot of nonfiction and narrative nonfiction that really falls under the umbrella of like environmental and also that. So it's very easy to combine the two. But also a lot of environmental stuff requires like grant writing and nonprofit writing, and that's all sort of like creative writing proposals. So I think they pair together pretty well.
Yeah. I'd also add that I'm sure everyone else can say this here, like literally every company needs writers, right? Everyone needs writers. And so I think everyone can feel pretty confident that if you look hard enough, maybe it takes some waiting, but you can find a company that aligns with, maybe environmental science that is looking for a writer or editor.
And you can always do it the other way around. You can keep your major and you can do like a creative writing minor. It's important to study things that you love while also making sure you have skills that you can apply to jobs that you wouldn't mind having.
And my thought would just be that if your option is to have a minor or not have a minor, always go for the minor.
Always get a minor.
Yeah, it's always better to know a little bit more and have more opportunity that way than to just lock yourself into one thing.
And it doesn't add that much time to your,
Yeah.
I got 2 minors.
And I
Granted,
did
the
too.
English major's kind of short, relatively speaking, but.
Yeah.
I'm one of the English faculty members, and as we think about preparing students, and specifically with their writing skills, we ask ourselves the question, are there specific genres of writing that we should focus on more that could help them be professional? I was interested by some of the genres that you mentioned, press releases, web-page copy, infographics, slide decks. Are there any of these genres you think that it would be useful for us as faculty to have our students focus on more particularly?
And we have to hear that in the next 60 seconds because another class is coming.
Okay. I think, yes, it's hard to pick one in general, but I think copywriting and content writing in general, I've seen lots of English majors go into that profession, and I think understanding a lot of the best practices carry over across those genres, right? But the marketing-centric approach to those genres, I think would be really valuable for students.
I think there should probably be more education on talking about a product or a service or a concept like a blog post, so that English majors can take great, writing with real-world applications that people would hire them to write for.
Thank you.
We better close with that and give our panelists